Well, it's more.
Michael,
Yeah.
when I look at two sides, the United States and Russia, I see Vladimir Putin after the meeting between Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin. He talked with his partners. He talked with India, China, and with all literally with all the countries of BRICS. It seems that he knows whatever happens in that meeting, he knows that he informed his partners and they're prepared for any outcome. On the part of the United States, you don't see that sort of unity between the United States and Europeans. They're totally different. Their position is totally different on Ukraine because Europeans don't want to, it seems to me they want a continuation of the conflict in Ukraine. They don't want to put an end to the conflict as soon as possible, which it seems that at least Donald Trump is talking about it. How do you see the way the pressures on these two leaders going to the meeting? Do you feel that the United States would somehow declare that it was all Russian fault if they could, if they don't achieve a substantial outcome in this meeting? It seems to me, because Donald Trump was talking about if it is successful, they're gonna have a second meeting. Then Zelensky gonna come in. This is amazing to me because Zelensky is not interested in reaching the deal. Your take on that?
Trump says that any meeting he has with anyone is successful. Any meeting goes wonderful, and Trump is won. How is he going to spell this out? Well, you mentioned that what Russia wants to talk about are the causes. Trump can find some refuge in saying, we talked about the broad setting and how we can settle much more than Ukraine. We can settle the whole relationship between America and Russia, and maybe even America, NATO, and Russia. But the second meeting that will come up, and I'm sure this is going to be raised today, is a warning, is it's not only the causes that Russia wants to talk about. The Russian NATO antagonism goes far beyond Ukraine. We mentioned it, it's extended into the Caucasus, with Azerbaijan and Armenia, with the U.S. control of the Zanguz corridor, threatening Iran.
Zangezur, Michael. Zangezur corridor.
Zangezur. Okay, thank you. Threatening Iran and China's Belt and Road trajectory. So Russia is going to say, let's deal with. They're going to be. NATO is attacking us, and with U.S. support on many fronts. NATO's attacking our tanker trade in the Baltics. If they attack our tanker trade, we're going to have to wipe out their naval ports from which they're attacking our naval trade. The MI6 and the CIA, apparently, are engaging in terrorism against Russian oil tankers by putting bombs on the tankers, attaching bombs that explode and sink the tankers. There's been 2 or 3 tankers already that have been victimized by the terrorism. I think Russia has to move on that. Russia still has a repertoire of attacks beyond Ukraine that NATO have engaged in, such as all of the 12 or 13 biolabs that Ukraine, and I should say that NATO had placed in Ukraine to wage biological warfare on Russia. I think, Russia's strongest position is that NATO is a terrorist organization. America is a terrorist country. And Russia is defending itself. That's how I think Russia is perceiving this and is depicting it to its own people. Obviously, that's not going to be recognized at the meeting, but I'm sure that Russia's going to bring up the fact that in order to settle the crisis that Trump calls the Ukraine troikas is only an arena. The crisis is the whole orientation of U.S. policy to try to break up Russia ever since the 1991 disaster of the 1990s in Russia. That's really going to be the big picture. The question is, how can they communicate this big picture to the West when none of the Western media or Congress or politicians are acting to explain and familiarizing the West with the things that Richard and I have been talking about so far, and that I think all of your other guests have been talking about for the last few months.
Richard, what Michael said about the Zangezur corridor, it's so much important because Donald Trump he's bragging about the deal he could cut between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And they're talking about Zangezur corridor, which the new name Donald Trump the new name is Trump's International Route of Peace and Prosperity. It's so amazing that How do you see, Richard? We know that that region is so much important for the security of Iran and Russia both, and with the situation in the Middle East, connecting that to Zangezur corridor, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and what Michael said about this economic communication among Russia, China, and Iran. Do you feel that we're going to have the same sort of conflict, somehow similar to what's going on in Ukraine, or somehow differently in different manner? Because Azerbaijan, I don't know if you heard, yesterday Azerbaijan said they're going to send weapons to Ukraine. So far, they didn't do it. And Russia said, you're not going to do this. You know what would be the outcome. It seems that something is boiling up in that region. You're taking that.
Yeah, put yourself, and I ask your audience, put yourself in the position of the United States and give yourself, just as a hypothetical, give yourself the idea, what would we be doing as a nation if we actually could finally admit that the empire is over? What would we do? When we watch that, in the last 6 months, China has established more solar energy than the rest of the world combined in the same period of time. I mean, it's the umpteenth example. How many do you need? They produce the best, cheapest electric vehicles on the planet. They are solving their pollution problem and their solar energy use. They don't need to worry about fossil fuels in the future. They're not going to be using them. That's going to be a problem of the West, making the West fall further and further behind in where new technologies are going. If you allow yourself for a minute, then what does the dying empire do? The British Empire, that has been dying for longer and is further down the road of what it means, recently, a few decades ago, made war on the Falkland Islands, where there are more sheep than people. And the British, took them a while, they actually won. We're going to meddle in Azerbaijan. Of course we are. As China creates a global pathway, we are going to nickel and dime that effort by being disruptive wherever we can. Can we find a local government that's in trouble and give them a ton of money to help them survive, if only they send a few rifles to Ukraine, which will make no difference to the outcome of that war? These are symbolic play games. They are the acts of desperation of a declining empire. That's what this is about. I don't think, I'm no expert in that area, please. I don't make any claim. I can find it on the map, and not much more than that. But these are, for me, sign after sign. Europe is finished. They have to come up with a way to overcome their disunity. There's no sign of it. They have to come up with a way to catch up with the new technology of the world, which is coming from China and the United States still. And they're not doing that. Where are they? Where's their future? Nowhere. They're desperately trying to hold on. They spent the last 75 years being the dutiful vassal of the United States. They don't know how to break out of that. They are terrified, both personally, because the careers of all their leaders were tutelage in all of that, and because it is hard to come up with a new plan. Your colonies are gone. Your social position in the world is gone. Your economic dominance is reduced to finance, as Michael shows us. And even that is being contested increasingly. When the world thinks of replacing the dollar, they're not looking at the euro. Right? It's important to understand they face the worst of all, not a decline, but a real end of their 5 centuries of dominance in the world. And they don't. And look at their leaders. If ever you had a collection of leaders inadequate to their historical moment, they are there right now for us to look at. And Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Modi and Mr. Putin, they're just riding on the wave as it goes up and enjoying the ride, much as the Europeans enjoyed the ride up, as the Americans did. I think that's the way to understand all of this, the Ukraine war and everything else. When that Ukraine war stops and it begins to be possible in Europe to talk about what that war cost the Europeans and what they got, the leaders who are held responsible. Look, it's hard for Tony Blair to move around England. He stopped being Prime Minister of England many years ago. But what's remembered is that he lied over and over again to justify England playing a minor role in the invasion of Iraq. He had repeated weapons of mass destruction, knowing nothing. He relied on the British intelligence, who either knew nothing or didn't tell him, and I don't know which is worse. He's not remembered well. No one does. The man is barely tolerated. And I think those are signs. The British are our future. We're the next empire. They're going down. We are now going down. And it's not pretty. And when you go down, more than ever, you need the symbolism that, oh no, you're still strong here, or no. And if I could conclude, that's Donald Trump. He's the cheerleader. I'm powerful. I can hit the world with tariffs. I can hit the bad guys with sanctions. I will decide. I heard him this morning. If he doesn't get the right response when he meets Mr. Putin in Alaska, well, he'll say this is not adequate and that meeting will come to an end. Look at the way the man talks. He talks like he's the man in charge. He's not the man in charge. But he does for the American people the theater of the man in charge. And when you can't be the real thing, going to the theatrical replica is very attractive.
I think Trump is trying to just cover his ass when he says he's going to walk out, meaning he knows that it's the Russians who are not going to surrender. Regarding Europe, yesterday it was announced that the Alternative for Deutschland now polls higher than the Christian Democrats and Christian Socialists and the Social Democratic Party in Germany. So Merz is now been essentially rejected by certainly the German public. But the United States is left only with one diplomatic lever, one weapon, and that's the ability to disrupt. And that's what Trump was using for his tariffs. He can disrupt other countries if they don't agree to live in the short run and agree to what Trump is offering in the short run, avoid unemployment, avoid a disruption of trade, because they really can't envision a long run. Well, the last 6 months have shown the BRICS countries and the global South that, well, it's not that hard to reorient our trade. Look at Brazil and China. Look at the other countries that have been replacing the American market with others. And part of the disruption, of course, is as you pointed out, climate. The U.S. position is to support oil and fossil fuels as the wave of the future, and to oppose wind power, solar power, water power, everything that is not oil. And for the reason I brought up the Zangezur corridor is because this is an attempt to disrupt not simply Russia in the Caucasus, but Iran itself. Nima, you and I were talking before the show, and I wish you could explain what you explained to me about the role of Azeri in Japan. I think the Americans are hoping that if they can stir up a fight between the Azerbaijan and Russia, that somehow this will have an effect on the Azeri province of northern Iran, which is what 50 years ago at the Hudson Institute, American military people were talking about how to break Iran into its component parts. What's the relation between Azerbaijan and Iran as you see it?
Yeah. Azerbaijan was part of Iran before all of this happening. That's why we have Azerbaijan in Iran. We have the country called Azerbaijan. But they were somehow hoping that they can bring these two parts together, make some sort of connection between the Azeri part of Iran in the northwest of Iran and the Azeri, the Azerbaijan, the country. But what has happened in the last, I would assume in the last 20 years, the last 10 years, somehow the conflict that Iran was facing and the way that Azerbaijan was behaving, and lately with the attack on Iran, Israeli attack on Iran, going to Azerbaijan, then attacking Iran, it's somehow these people have no, they were somehow feeling that because of the language, they're talking the same language, the cultural issue, the cultural connection between the two. But right now it's all changed. And I don't know if the people in the United States, those people, policymakers, understand what's going on in Iran. It's some sort of, I would say, unity. It's unity is coming from within the society. You have in Iran, many people would assume that nobody knows. Many people don't know what is going on in Iran. Iran is some kind of rainbow. You have Azeris, Kurds, Lurs, Persian, all together for centuries, for thousands of years, they were living each other. And many people don't know that we have a lot of Jewish people in Iran. It's all amazing to me when I talk with people. They feel that Iran is somehow, it's all political. Iran doesn't like this and that. But when it comes to Azeri and Azerbaijan, Michael, I think the main issue for Iran is the security and the connection between Iran and Russia and China. Because Iran has warned Armenia as well, said, you're going to, in that direction, you're going to disconnect us from Russia and China. You're going to face a lot of issues. We're going to go after you. We're going to talk to you differently. And it seems to me somehow the Trump administration feels that they can do something in that region. But it's not just about Iran. It's about, as you've mentioned, Iran, China, and Russia. I don't see they can somehow manipulate the way that they did in Ukraine, because Armenia and Azerbaijan are aware of what's going on, because Russia was talking with Azerbaijan. Iran is communicating with both Azerbaijan and Armenia. If you go to that direction, we're gonna teach you to behave, because we want a better relationship with you. This is the way that I see what's going on in that region. Your understanding could be helpful, Michael, in the way that you see economically how the economic issues and the connection between the countries would finally decide about the security of the region.
Well, if I could just jump in, here's a very short lesson in geography. They're all over there. Of course, the Azeris, the Armenians, they have to come to terms with their immediate environment, which is Russia, Iran, the Belt Road Initiative, China, India. Why in the world, over time, would they want to be the lonely outpost of the United States, a dying empire? You don't make deals that way. Maybe temporarily, maybe this leader or that leader, but the longer run, that's not going to happen. Just like it's going to take longer before Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Panama work something out with the Chinese and the Russians. That's going to be a slow, careful, because they have to deal with their enormous vulnerability to the United States in the way that Mexico and Canada also have to. It's not that they can't do some things. The Canadians are now opening up relations with China very quickly and very importantly, with aluminum and lumber and all kinds, very important. But still, they work very slowly and they're very nervous about what they have to come to terms with a 2,000-mile border or 3,000-mile border with that country. And I think you're going to see the same thing. The logical next step for countries in the Caucasus is either to ally themselves with the BRICS, which some are doing, or to become one of those countries that plays the dying empire and the arriving empire against each other. We're everybody's friend. We'll send the next mission that we need to help build a railroad in our country. We'll send it to London and New York, but instead of coming home after that, they will fly directly to New Delhi or Beijing or that. And who's going to give us the best deal? I already have noticed and followed, because of my interest in Africa, that many of the railroads being built in Africa now are being built by the Chinese. But that was after those people sent a mission to the West, said, we want help for this railroad, what can you do? And they got offers, and then they went to the other side and they got offers. And guess what? The offers coming from the BRICS, I want to remind everyone, the BRICS is now a bigger, richer unity of economic strength than are the G7. So of course, it should surprise no one that a better deal can often be offered by the other side. And so the railroad will be built by the Chinese. And I think that's going to be the strategy in the end, that Armenia will likely follow, that Azerbaijan will likely follow, and that even if the politics opens up, Iran itself will follow.
There's a social dimension that Nima alluded to that explains the West's failure to understand what's happening. The West has always been strongly racist. The American government officials cannot imagine a multi-ethnic society. You're having Trump basically declare war on immigrants. You've had the whole of American history being a fight against the indigenous population, including my ancestors in the Chippewa tribe. All of the Western colonialism has been racist, and the last thing that they could even imagine is multi-ethnic. Russia is a multi-ethnic society and multi-religious. The Iran is multi-ethnic, and I've known many Iranian Jewish leaders who have prominent positions in Iran. They don't have any problem being multi-ethnic. It's the West that is trying to play the race card, the ethnic divisions, trying to stir up and set and interfere with the whole rest of the world's multi-ethnic bit. And I've got to say, this is what Roman Christianity is all about. It's to hate people who are not part of your group. This is what made the Roman Church so break away from the Orthodox Christian Church in Constantinople, in the East, in all of the other 5 patriarchies. Basically, the Romans declared any population that's not part of our religion is the enemy. That's the whole background of the mentality that you're seeing in Israel today, and any of the whole Western sphere. They don't understand the West, and in a way, this intolerance of multi-ethnicity is a cohesive factor in organizing the rest of the world, saying we can work together. The only people that we cannot work with are the West that do not accept us because we're not their ethnicity, we're not their religion, and they've declared a religious and almost ethnic war. That's the whole history of the British Empire, the French Empire, the German Empire, the American Empire, and the whole West going back to medieval times.
Yeah, and it is. I'm struck only because my early work as an academic was in the British Empire, particularly the British Empire in Africa, and I was always amazed. They really did have a manual or a recipe book, and it was to find what they would call in Africa tribal differences, and they would then play them. This part of the country where there was this tribe would be set against the other. That's how they divide and conquer was their rule. Divide and administer was their rule. And so, yeah, they've done that with, the imperialism and colonialism just gave them a global platform upon which to practice their politics. And I'm sure there are residues of it all now.
Well, Ukraine is a residue of that.
Yes, Ukraine as well. That's right. Ukraine as well. And it is. I don't want to lose it, and I'm not preaching to you because you need it. But there is a part of this that is unspeakable, and yet we must speak it. The people of Ukraine have been sacrificed here. You have seen the United States, the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainian leaders work together to ravage that country. I mean, look, here's the only thing one can say that against that, which I know people won't want to hear. But at least the Russians have not done to Ukraine what the Israelis have done in Gaza. They didn't go in and destroy Kiev, the center of the other society, and reduce it to rubble. They haven't declared their goal to be having the Ukrainians out of Ukraine, which is, if you think about it, an extraordinary moment. Because we are constantly looking at the Ukraine war with the Gaza story in our minds as if they were each a lens for looking at the other. And we get upset, and I understand it, if a Russian missile gets to Kiev and there are a dozen people killed. But they don't kill in a month what is killed in two days in Gaza. And in the end, not that the numbers are crucial, but the scale of what's going on. It's a message to the whole world of what vulnerability we are on from ourselves as a species. That some of us could be doing what we are doing. Could sit there now 3.5 years into the war in Ukraine of this endless destruction of their, electric facilities, the things that have been the targets of Russian response, or by that matter, targets of the Ukrainians, because as people don't seem to understand, the territory captured by Russia, which is now 25% more or less, if I understand correctly the map, the Ukrainians bomb that area. So now the Ukrainians that have been pushed to westward are bombing their own country that was taken by the Russians. So that in those areas, you have destruction the Ukrainians have caused to their own, what they want to think of as their own country.